I'd like to call this Community Advisory Committee meeting to order. Just to begin with, first of all, procedural notes. This meeting is being held electronically as per Section 19I of the Town's Procedure Bylaw 6228-19 as amended due to the COVID-19 situation. Before we move on to the appointment of the chair and vice chair, and I will offer and then pass on the chair to the individual, I just want to welcome two newly appointed members. We have Earl and Shivangi, who is joining us today, and they will be, of course, now part of this committee. And we'll be, of course, be happy to, welcome to the committee. And we look forward to working with you all and also all the committee members. To begin with, first of all, we do have the appointment of the chair and vice chair for the year 2021 for the Community Advisory Committee. So we will deal with two appointments separately. So to begin with the appointment of the chair, so do we have a volunteer or anybody who would like to put forth a nomination for someone or nominate a member?
I'm happy to do it again for another year.
Okay, thanks, Balpreet. So would anybody like to move and second Balpreet to be the chair for this year? Oh, so I saw Laura, so moved by Laura, seconded by Janet. So, all right, any comments or questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, perfect. All those in favor? Opposed? Nobody? Okay, perfect, that carries. So then over to you, Madam Chair, to appoint the vice chair for the committee.
I think you're on mute still.
Yeah. Sorry about that. You'd think by now I'd have the hang of this, right? I move, may I please have a motion to nominate a vice chair for 2021 of the Community Advisory Committee?
You want a motion?
A nomination or someone to step forward?
I can step forward. Unless someone else is interested.
Thank you, Laura. So can I have a mover and a seconder? Janet and Jen? I call a vote. All in favor? Okay, perfect. So let's move on to the third agenda item, approval of the agenda. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated by Legislative Services? Laura, and seconded by Chris. Was there any questions or comments regarding the agenda? Okay, so I call a vote. All in favor? All right, well, good. And is it on to agenda item 4? Is there any declaration of pecuniary? I never can pronounce it. Thank you. Interest or general nature thereof?
I'm not sure. It's Chris here. I'll just comment that obviously a lot of the subjects for this evening are obviously sports related, and I am a coach and member of the Aurora Diggers kind of sports family here. My daughter plays on the U10 Aurora Diggers team, so I wanted to just disclose that I have that background and that affiliation with the Aurora Diggers, and they were mentioned several times throughout the attachments as being one of the groups that was consulted and has been part of a lot of the goings on around the sports plan for Aurora. And beyond that, I also play in other sports leagues and have run some sports leagues in Aurora and more broadly in York region over the last number of years that are all softball related. So just wanted to make sure that I made that clear.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Noted. So I'm assuming Isha, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're okay with Chris's disclosure and we can move forward?
That's correct. Just to clarify, Chris, that is to the item which is regarding the sports plan?
Yes.
Yeah, just
All right, perfect. Okay, that's right. Yeah, so we will note that, not a problem. Yeah.
Agenda number 5, receipt of the minutes. May I please have a motion to receive the minutes of November 19th, 2020? Moved by Earl and seconded by Janet. Was there any questions or comments on the minutes from our last meeting? Okay, so I call a vote. All in favor? Perfect, thank you. Agenda item 6, delegations. We have no delegations this evening. So we're going to move on to matters of concern. 7.1 is a memorandum from the manager of this business supports regarding the update regarding the sports field development strategy. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion? Laura, and I need a seconder. Councillor Humphreys. So the memorandum regarding the updates is received, and the community advisory comments regarding the sports will be received and referred to by the staff. Is there a staff member who would like to speak to this item?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you through you, Madam Chair. Yes, my name is John Furman. I'm the manager of business support, and if it pleases the committee, I'd like to give you a brief overview of the memorandum and the report that went to council regarding the update for the sport field development strategy, and just to let you know in general where we're at, what we're planning, and certainly respond to any questions if you have any. The majority of the information is contained in the general committee report of November 17th, which was attached with your package this evening. But just to summarize what that covers, I last spoke to this committee in the fall of 2019 when we were engaging the consultant in the field development strategy. The field development strategy was concluded and adopted by council in January of 2020. Since then, we've been moving forward, looking at some of the recommendations and trying to see what we can implement. Of course, our friend COVID has slowed the process significantly, but we have continued to move forward as best as possible. The field development strategy did a comprehensive assessment of our current sports field inventory, both rectangular fields and ball diamonds. It looked at our current needs. We conducted a thorough assessment with our user groups, looking at both current needs and anticipated future needs, looking out 10 years through to 2031. The strategy identifies a need for an additional 5 ball diamonds between now and 2031, and an additional 7 rectangular fields to meet growth. In addition to the 7 rectangular fields, we also addressed the upcoming loss of the fields known as the Magna fields, although we are now referring to those as the Stronach fields, in recognition of the fact that the lands are owned by the Stronach group, and they are the ones allowing us to use them. There is no actual connection to Magna other than proximity. So there are 19 sports fields there that we will be losing. And it was identified that we would need at least 13 fields of varying sizes to replace those. At the time the study was completed, we were anticipating that 2021 or 2022 would be the last year we would have access to use the Stronach fields. Fortunately, the Stronach group has confirmed for us that they do not have immediate plans to develop that site, and they have confirmed for us that we will have use of those fields for the next 5 years. So we know that we'll have them at least through the summer of 2025, which gives us a little more breathing room and time to conduct further assessment and come forward with more detailed recommendations on replacement fields in the long term. On the subject of ball diamonds, the council approval last year to proceed with the 2 new ball diamonds at the Hallmark lands will certainly meet any of our short-term needs, and those fields will be constructed this year. That project is underway. So that will address, like I say, all our short-term ball diamond needs, which means we can sort of set ball diamonds aside temporarily and focus on the rectangular field needs, which will be a little more immediate. Again, with the Stronach fields, that relieves some pressure. We do still have a shortfall of 7 fields to meet both immediate and long-term needs, and so we are starting to develop that. Those fields will range in size. There are 5 different sizes of rectangular fields overall, and so we'll need a variety of different sizes to meet those growing needs. We're looking at really 3 key areas right now. One is, what can we repurpose within existing parkland? Are there fields that are underutilized potentially given their current configuration that we can repurpose into a new configuration to increase utilization? There's not a lot of opportunity there, but we're certainly investigating that. We're also looking at new field development within existing lands. So are there existing parklands that we have the room to develop fields? And we have identified some fields, particularly in some of our new parks like Trent Park, for example. We've received budget approval through the last budget cycle, and the Parks Operations Division will begin some work this year on preparing grounds. We're not fully developing fields, but we are starting to increase maintenance activities in some park areas where, by increased mowing and fertilization, we can start developing the land to make them more suitable for sports play, so that in the next year or 2 or 3, as they become necessary, it's easy to convert them into playable sports fields. So we've started to identify those opportunities. And the third area that we're focusing on is partnerships, in particular with school boards. That's one of our greatest opportunities there. The fourth area, which we're not really focusing on right now, but the fourth area of opportunity would be new field development on new lands. But that would require the acquisition of new land, which is the most expensive part of the equation. So that is certainly our last option. We will look at any alternative to having to acquire new land. The partnership opportunities with the school boards are ideal for a number of reasons. First and foremost is the land is already there. Land is by far the most expensive aspect of field development. So if we can access the land for free, then we're now only looking at the cost of developing the fields. The report that went to council in November identifies that we have had meetings with the York Catholic School Board, and we were attempting to schedule meetings with the York Region District School Board. Since that report was written, we have in fact engaged the York Region District School Board as well. And so we are in current discussions with both school boards. These discussions are at the confidential level at this point because the school boards do not want to have any information publicly disclosed, of course, regarding decisions that they have not yet made about their lands. But what I can certainly tell you is that both school boards are very open and to the discussion of partnership opportunities within school board lands in town, and we're continuing to pursue those discussions, and we will be actually coming back to council as well with a closed session report in April, I believe it's scheduled to further discuss that. But so without getting into detail, the school board partnerships do look like a very positive potential prospect for field development, which works out very well for the town because it is one of the most cost-effective ways to manage it. And I believe that pretty much covers the overview of where we're at today and what we're working on going forward. Unless there's any questions.
Just to get a sense of with this dialogue with the school boards, if it were to be successful, and I think it's a fantastic idea, would there be sufficient, diamonds and soccer fields available then? Or would you need to supplement it with new acquisition of land?
Through you, Madam Chair. Certainly, we have the potential of meeting the majority or a large portion of the need for rectangular fields. It really ultimately will depend on to what degree the school boards are willing to partner, and in what locations will determine how many fields. Certainly, we do want to focus on the development of artificial turf fields because we get the most bang for our buck, to say. A typical artificial turf field is worth the equivalent of 2.5 to 3 grass fields. So we get a lot more playable time, and we can, depending on configuration, we can also use a full-size artificial turf field in many different formats. So you could use it as a full-size field, you could use it as 2 intermediate fields, you could use it as 4 very small junior fields. So there's a lot of flexibility there. Where we can't really anticipate any success in meeting the field needs is through ball diamonds. The school boards do not support ball diamonds. You'll notice that new schools do not build ball diamonds. Schools that have old ball diamonds are of a smaller size. They're not of the senior softball size, which would be our need. And so the land is not available on a school board property to support a ball diamond. So ball diamonds, we will always have to look at other opportunities. Maybe there are partnership opportunities with other landowners. We have not looked into that as yet, but that is most likely the area where if we had to go anywhere to acquire new land, it may be to support ball diamonds. As I mentioned earlier, the development of the 2 senior softball diamonds at Hallmark will definitely help a great deal. And that ball diamonds will be a primary focus when we look at other potential repurposing of existing parkland if we have the space for it. But with rectangular fields, we think we can accomplish quite a lot potentially with the school boards. That will all depend on the number of fields we can do given the possible locations available.
Is there any further comments or?
I have my hand up, so I can ask some questions.
Go ahead, Chris.
So through you, Madam Chair. So a couple questions. Number one would just be, when you talk about senior softball, do you have ideas around what the dimensions are of the fields that are going to be done at the Hallmark lands? And one of the reasons why I asked this, I mentioned earlier that I've been involved in a lot of the softball sports leagues. I was in charge of kind of getting permits to run York Region men's slow pitch for a number of years. And I specifically call we need to have fields that are flexible that can be used for adults because that's where a lot of the permit time is going to be taken, especially during the week, but also that is usable for children when appropriate, and then across baseball and softball. And the Bethesda fields in Stouffville in particular are something that I just wanted to call attention. They're quite large fields. They have the ability to bring out kind of a mobile pitching mound. It's not a permanent field with a permanent pitching mound, which makes it only usable for baseball versus not having a pitching mound only usable for softball. But it was kind of like a hybrid, and they had the 2 giant fields in Stouffville, the Bethesda fields. So just wanted to comment and see if you had any feedback on kind of what the size is and what the makeup of those fields are going to be in order to maximize the usability across multiple user groups for Aurora.
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair. The 2, I don't recall the actual dimensions off the top of my head, but they are both going to be senior softball fields, similar to that of Optimus Park. Yeah, I suspect you're familiar with Optimus Park through your involvement with the Diggers. So it'll be a field of that size, approximately. While it's suitable for adult play, it would not be suitable for hardball play. We have the design uses every possible bit of land available to maximize the outfield, but it is limited to a senior softball size. So while you could potentially bring out a portable mound, you would not have the outfield distance you would want to actually play hardball. At once, maybe at a junior level, like 12, 13 years old. But once you get into the higher teens or adults, it wouldn't be suitable for hardball. But certainly, it's comparable to any of our other senior softball fields in town.
And a follow-up question for. What is the consultation or the process that you go through in assessing existing fields for potential upgrades? I can imagine, just use Matchell Park as an example, right? There's two very small diamonds that are there. They're not fenced. There's no lights, but there is some housing around. And I'm sure anytime you're thinking about, formalizing something and putting lights in and having permits and things run throughout the summer, there's lots of consultation that people that live in around that park, when there's a change like that happening, they want to have their voice heard. So what is the process of evaluating the existing parks that we have for either soccer use or softball use? And what are the criteria that you're going to use, or your team is going to use to assess that where the prioritization is of redeveloping one over another? And when will that actually happen?
Through you, Madam Chair. So yes, there's a couple of different steps. The first phase of the analysis would be an internal consultation. Really, we're going to look at our data based on field utilization. So for example, we may identify a diamond that is underutilized, and then we will look at, okay, the hours that it is used, can those hours be accommodated on another existing field? And then if we can determine that that's yes, that can happen, then we'll look at, okay, we now know that we can live without this field in its current configuration. So the next step is, will a larger field, and that's typically what we'd be looking at is larger fields, would a larger field fit within the park space available? And if it does, then we know that we can pretty much move on to the next step. That first phase also will include consultation with the user groups to, again, reaffirm their data and what their needs are going to be as well, so that they know if we're taking a smaller field offline and replacing it with a larger one, will that meet their needs going forward? And then we look at the impacts to the park, and we would then look at what level and details of public consultation would be required. Certainly, if we're looking at adding lights and significantly increasing playing time in a community park, which has close proximity to residential areas, we're going to need a higher level of public consultation than if we were doing something in a area that really didn't have any impact on neighboring communities, for example. But we would assess that at that stage. So it's very hard to give you much more specifics than that, because each situation will, of course, be different.
I appreciate the consultation back with user groups, because so many of those user groups, and again, I speak a little bit for myself, like a bit more like experts on what we could use for what would be the most value and impact to the users, whether it's adults, whether it's children. And so I think that's pretty good. I guess my last question is kind of twofold. One, we have, like a Sportsplex, like a Richmond Green, right? And it is that destination. And you've talked a little bit about, wanting to have Aurora have the ability to host, tournaments and sporting events and whatnot. So, and it kind of, this question goes hand in hand with just the size of our town and the comment you just made around, if there's a piece of property that is not close to houses, then it's an easier thing, right? There's less impact. But given Aurora's constraints and how we're densifying, are there a lot of opportunities where it isn't going to be impacting residents, or are most of the situations and most of the parks really are in close proximity to houses and therefore are going to require that higher level of consultation?
Again, through you, Chair, Madam Chair. Again, it's going to depend on site-specific information, but I would say that yes, most of our locations are close to residential. When it comes to supporting these tournament-type venues, certainly through the consultation we've already conducted with the user groups, when it comes to ball in particular, their feedback is. The fields that we have at the Aurora Family Leisure Complex, being 3 senior softball and the 1 hardball, and that added with the 2 diamonds going in at Hallmark would absolutely meet the tournament needs. And that was one of the strong arguments for moving forward with 2 ball diamonds at Hallmark, is to provide that secondary location that had more than 1 diamond to support tournament and event play. With soccer fields, we have the Shepherd's Bush complex, and we have the Stronach complex right now, which also strongly support tournament play as well, with multiple fields in one location. But yes, going forward, a lot of I would guess right now that any significant field development will, in most cases, have an impact on neighboring communities potentially. Having said that, one of the key things, lighting is typically the major consideration when it comes to sport field development and the community impact. At least in my experience, lighting has been the major consideration. And with the LED lighting systems that are now available, and we've been, I guess an example would be what we installed recently with the new artificial turf field at Stuart Burnett Park behind the Stronach Center, is the lighting is very directional, very focused, and it's unlike lighting that went in 10 years ago. The lighting has very little, if any, impact on neighboring residential anymore. It is very focused on the field and very easy to contain. And the neighboring residential just does not even notice it compared to what you might have with lighting 10 years ago, where it's shining through your backyard and into your window. So the products available are much better and much more conducive to neighborhood use.
Thank you for all of that. I appreciate it.
Is there any further comments?
I do have a question through you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, for the consideration made from Public School Board, will that by any chance impact the school's existing extracurricular / sports activities?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, I would use the example of the partnership we have with St. Maximilian Kolbe Catholic High School as an example. We've been in partnership with them on that artificial turf field. I think it's been about 7 years now, and it's been very successful. The way that partnership works is the school has exclusive use of the field right through to 6 p.m. every school day. And then the town has exclusive use after 6 p.m. and on weekends, and then on non-school days. It works very well. I would say in the years we've been working with them, I think there's been one day where we wanted to have access during the daytime, and they were able to accommodate us. And there's been a handful of evenings where maybe they have a special regional event or a school tournament where they want to use the field into the evening, and we accommodate for that in our agreement with them, and we work with them closely to make that happen. So there have been no incidents where either the town nor the school board has had to cancel or not hold any extracurricular activities.
Okay, thank you. And one quick follow-up on that. Is the same consideration being done for private schools as well?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, we will be looking at potential partnerships with private schools also. For example, I've already had discussions with the Aurora Montessori School because they have an intermediate-sized soccer field on their property. Unfortunately, they are actually planning to develop that site to expand their school building, so that field will be disappearing, but we are certainly looking at opportunities like that. We have had some preliminary discussions with St. Andrews College, for example, and we'll continue to talk to them going forward as well. So we're open to any potential partnership opportunities that may be out there.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, is there any further comments? Councillor Humphreys?
Sorry there. Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone. By the way, I'm happy to be here. Sorry, I joined a few minutes late, but excited to be part of this committee. So wonderful. Thank you very much. I just have just a comment further to what John was mentioning earlier. From my time on council, we've seen a lot more of these partnerships occur, and they really work really well. Mostly the schools use them during the day, their fields, so it leaves a lot of time on weekends and evenings for the community to take advantage. I don't know if you've noticed the Maximilian High School, the back turf there. We actually did a partnership there where we both pitched in to get the artificial turf, and we've got great usage out of that field as well as the school. So some really great partnerships like that are continuing to evolve. So I see this as a really great way to move forward. So the more we can do of this, I think the better for our community, and again allows us a lot more opportunity to gain access to fields without having to do a full-on purchase and acquisition of lands. So it helps a lot in the long run. But absolutely appreciate the comments. Thanks. Just wanted to comment. Thanks.
Okay, is anyone else wanting to comment?
I put my hand back up. I
apologize. I can't see the hands, Chris. So
okay.
Just yell.
So through you, Madam Chair. So my other question, I guess, is around so not necessarily sports fields, but again, when I was reading through all of the attachments that were put in, there was comments around, obviously domes and for winter use, and the town wanting to, obviously when the lease is up on the one in industrial, taking it back over, and just thinking about off-season training. So whether it's soccer or it's softball, I know through COVID, again reflecting on my time and trying to help lead the Aurora Diggers, we would normally get permits through public schools to be able to use their gyms in the wintertime, to be able to have some off-season training for softball, because space is so limited. Now with COVID, we haven't been able to do any of those things because there are no permits available. People aren't able to meet. We're in a lockdown. But even when it wasn't, the space limitations were real. And so if sports leagues, et cetera, wanted to get access to off-season training indoor, how does the town plan to take that into consideration as they're building out this plan? Are there considerations for where spaces like that will be made available? Do we already have, what is the usage of the spaces that are already available, and what is the plan to do more if there's a belief that there's a demand for it?
Through you, Madam Chair. Although indoor spaces and off-season training for sports fields was not part of the process in developing the sports field development strategy itself, it is something we are certainly very well aware of, and we are giving consideration to that as we move forward. The upcoming development of new gymnasium at the SARC, for example, will help with that. The existing Aurora Sports Dome is certainly available and utilized by multiple sports, including baseball, football, soccer. So that is available for indoor training. And although it is heavily utilized, it is not. I would, in fairness, during peak times, it probably is maxed out. So although another dome, for example, is not something that was part of the strategy, it's certainly something for consideration that we will be looking at in future years, as far as whether in part of our assessment, we'll look at what are the winter needs for fields, and if it looks like there's enough need to support a second facility, we would certainly look at that, and we would come forward with appropriate recommendations for council consideration. But at this point, we would still need to collect more data on that. But like I said, it is certainly something that we are thinking of and are considering. We haven't got to that point yet with it, and we're hoping also, like I say, gymnasiums are a strong focus right now, and with the new development of the SARC gymnasium, we hope to help with that as well.
I think the availability, to your point, can be constrained, and the cost.
Yeah.
right? So to go to a full blown renting out a dome with real turf and everything else, as an example, very expensive, which is why a lot of the user groups end up going to public school and Catholic school gymnasiums, because the cost is very, very low. It's not ideal, but it is feasible to be available to the masses, right? And so that's where when things are left to the private sector and you're trying to go these other routes, it can be cost prohibitive for teams to be able to afford to actually get the permits, which is where the town can come in and maybe have a middle ground that is still affordable and maybe doesn't have to be quite as fancy, but is better maybe than, again, your typical school gymnasium setup.
Certainly. One of the things with the school partnerships that we are talking about, and again, it's very preliminary. It's hard. We don't know what the school board wants to do. They haven't made any decisions on the old Dr. G.W. Williams, for example, but we've already put it on the table for discussion that the town is interested in that gymnasium when they're no longer using it. Again, we don't know what their plans are for the building, but we've certainly expressed an interest in having access to that gymnasium and to increasing access to gymnasiums within the town as well. So we're certainly putting that on the radar with the school boards also.
Okay, I am able to see hands now, so if you do put your hands up, I will pay attention. Is there any other comments? So John, I just wanted to touch on one thing that I was a little concerned about, because it mentions in your report here that sport field user groups it's not been possible to engage them since the COVID. And I'm wondering if you guys have plans to re-engage those users, considering, this current pandemic doesn't seem like it's slowing down anytime soon. Because it mentions that you're re-engaging, but it also mentions that there were some concerns that the users had that wasn't really researched further, right?
Yes, actually. So just to clarify, we certainly are in regular contact with our user groups on an ongoing basis. It's just on the specific subject of field utilization research. We haven't been able to pursue that at this point, because most of these organizations are volunteer run. Those that do have staff have had to lay off their staff in many cases. So where we're able to work with the data that we have, we also need them to help us with a little more data from their side as to how they plan on using fields and what their projected needs are and things like that. And they just don't have the ability at this point in time to commit any resources to doing that research. The good news is these are really, that part is going to be really focused on longer term needs with the hallmark lands for the ball diamonds and with the extension for 5 years of the Stronach fields. We know we're in good shape in the short term, so we're not overly concerned about pressure being time pressures for engaging the user groups to do a little more research and work with us, because that will really tie into future field needs, longer term development. Where right now we'll focus on the short term needs. We have enough of our own existing data already to identify what our short term needs are.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Balpreet, question? If that's okay.
Yeah, Janet, go ahead.
Yeah, John, I'm involved with Special Olympics just a bit now, not as much as I was before, and I didn't see them on your list, and quite possible with COVID that you were unable to connect with someone there. I'd be happy to put you in touch with the individual who heads up the sports side of things. They currently play softball up in Newmarket because of lack of fields in Aurora. They only play once a week, but I know a couple of years ago there was potential interest to expand to, like, it's only a couple hours a week, but I think that group should be included in it as part of that whole disability demographics. Your report touched on para. I didn't see any mention of intellectual disability, and while that's a separate program from the town may want to have some special needs programs as well. I think with lack of facilities, that's been a detriment. They haven't been able to. Multi-sport is sort of the trend up till age 12 with individuals with an intellectual disability. and the town may have an interest in field usage there as well. So I guess that was a comment, but then also I guess as asking if you've looked at soccer, softball, baseball, with changing demographics in the town and looking at special needs, was there planning that went into future potential programming for different sports that could be used on rectangular fields as well? I'm not conversant at all on what the trends in sports are there, but presumably there's some demand that the town may not currently be able to meet.
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair. I know that we reached out to Special Olympics in the consultation, but I don't believe anybody responded to us.
Yes.
Having said that, if you have a contact that you want to
Yes.
send my way, I'm more than happy to engage in discussion with them. I would say that Special Olympics was an exception to our rule, because what we did, we have a lot of small user groups that may book an hour here or an hour there, and to engage all of them would have been engaging about another 100 groups. So we did not engage those small user groups. We focused on our larger user groups, but Special Olympics was an exception because of the uniqueness of their programming. We did reach out, but like I say, nobody responded, so we weren't able to get their input. I'm happy to work with them and bring their input into the discussion for sure.
Okay.
As for the second question around alternate sports, that wasn't part of this study. However, it was part of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which was conducted back in 2016 and would be included in that going forward. I believe right now, off the top of my head, I think that's put out in the capital budget for 2022 or 23 to do a revised Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And it's through that master plan process that the consultation looks at other sports. I know, I can tell you off the top of my head, for example, the last master plan we did back in 2016, cricket was an example that was raised, but the consultant did the research, went out to the community, and ultimately found out that there was not enough interest in the community at that time to support the development of a suitable facility, but it would be part of the master planning process.
Yes, as follow up to that, I wasn't thinking of different types of fields per se, but of other activities that could be done on a rectangular field, whether that was looked at. I know that was something when they looked at the Aquatic Study, for instance, they realized that there was a whole wealth of programs that are not currently offered that could be offered. I don't know if the same sort of thing was looked at with the field study. Are there other activities that could be run on a rectangular field that currently aren't?
And so I guess, no, we didn't look at that. I guess the primary difference being that with the Aquatic Study, a lot of the pool use is town-specific programming. So that would look at what types of programming is the town planning on running. Whereas on our outdoor sports fields, the town typically doesn't run the programming. We just provide it to the community. So we base our assessment on who is coming to us to rent those fields for their own programming. And this particular study was more about meeting the needs of what we're being asked for versus looking at how those fields could be programmed.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any, Chris, your hand's up.
Hopefully my last question, because I know I've had a lot of them. So thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. The last question, hopefully for me, is when I was reading through the documents, there was one comment around like communications. And so my question is, what is the role that the town plays in communicating or advocating on behalf of user groups? And so the example of like, does the town post things to their website? Does the town use their Twitter account or any other social media accounts to help these user groups get the message out about the offerings that they have? So for example, that there's tryouts happening, or that sign up for this, sign up for that. Is that something that that the town does on behalf of those user groups to help get the message out more broadly across our community?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, we don't, other than advertising opportunities, we don't formally have a process for supporting our user groups. It's a very wide range of groups. We work with literally a couple of hundred different sport user groups around the year in different sports, and they all, for the most part, they all do a very effective job of communicating their registration opportunities. The town doesn't provide a support for that. Some of them choose to take advertising opportunities by putting an advertisement in our leisure guide, for example, where our communications tends to be more around field closures, for example, due to inclement weather, things like that. We do certainly we do provide support and advice to user groups. I have worked closely with some user groups myself, and Lisa Worth and Aaron Hamilton, who are also on the call to speak to the sport development plan. Through those activities, they also provide support from a planning perspective, I would say, to user groups as well. But we don't provide the actual mechanisms.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any further comments? Okay, so if there's no further comments, I'm going to call a vote. All in favor? Okay, opposed? All right, that carries. Thank you, John, for your time. And we're going to go on to our next. Sorry, guys, I just lost my piece of paper here. We're going to go into our next agenda, the memorandum from the Sports and Community Development Specialist regarding Sports Plan Status Report 1. Firstly, we will have a presentation from Aaron Hamilton. Aaron, just to let you know, we have 10 minutes allocated for you, and whenever you're ready to start, go ahead.
I apologize, but is there a sound issue, Aaron?
Yes, sorry, Aaron, we can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I apologize. I will start from scratch just to make sure everybody can hear. So sorry about that. Thank you for bringing that forward. So good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Community Advisory Committee. I'm happy to be here tonight to provide you with an update on the sport plan and the progress since I started in the position of August 2019. After a thorough review of the sport plan, a number of recommendations were put forward, or a number of priorities were identified to focus on in the immediate. So the sport plan itself has over 25 different recommendations within it. My focus in the immediate revolves around these 8 priority areas. There has been some shifting and changing as a result of COVID, which I think everybody is doing, shifting and changing, focusing on what may be in the immediate that needs some focus. I will be touching on each of these topics throughout my presentation in various formats, so you can have an update on where I'm at with each of these 8 priority areas. To start off, I'm going to focus on women and girls in sport as one of our priorities. In early 2020, we engaged in a process with the Canadian Women in Sport, where we collaborated and developed a gender equity report. From there, in the gender equity report, there were 6 gaps that were identified in this community that needed to be addressed to focus on enhancing sport for women and girls. The first being governance, where we are focusing on working with local sport organizations on policy development, the Town of Aurora Recreation Department in terms of the program delivery and the goals and objectives to be able to meet gender equity. Awareness focuses on getting a better understanding of where the community sits in terms of being aware of the opportunities that currently do exist for women and girls in sport. Promotion of women in sport focuses on new initiatives and different ways that we can celebrate and recognize females in sport and reach more community members. And then from there, innovative partnerships, programming, recruitment, and retention. Where this really focuses on is the need to shift, change, and take a new approach to how we're partnering with groups, how we're programming, and how we're recruiting and retaining females to be more effective to support ongoing participation and initial engagement in sport. Through the Gender Equity Report, an implementation has been developed to move forward on these 6 priority gaps. One of the first areas under governance was the creation of a Sport Equity and Inclusion Committee to guide the execution of the implementation plan based on the Gender Equity Report. So that committee has been identified and we've met now 4 times. And our current priority is focusing on the development of a gender equity policy and the implementation of that policy and plan with local sport organizations. So to start off, we're working with 4 pilot organizations to implement a gender equity policy. We're in the very early stages where we've communicated with them and we'll be meeting with and presenting to the boards and the staff of those organizations throughout the month of March and in early April. Sorry, I'm just having some mouse issues. As well, in regards to women and girls in sport, last year we had a program called 20 Female Leaders in 2020. It was funded through the Canadian Women in Sport Wise Fund, where we financially supported female coaches, officials, and board members to obtain training and professional development. All the females have been featured on the Town of Aurora website and Facebook page. 2 of our females were featured in the See What She Can Do podcast in the initial launch of that podcast. And we're providing the NCCP Planning a Practice course on March 6th. And that was free to those that are part of the 20 Female Leaders in 2020. Next, our focus is on sport community resources and guidance. So this crosses over multiple of our priority areas. Recently, we launched the Sport for Inclusion resource, and this is a resource for local sport organizations that have persons with a disability integrated into their regular programming, where they can provide some education guidance, various scenarios, and much more in working with persons with a disability. So I work directly with our community services department in the development of the resource. It went forward to the Accessibility Advisory Committee for review and feedback, and then it was released to the local sport organizations in early 2021. In addition, we've developed a volunteer orientation manual, and the purpose to the manual is to provide a template where local sport organizations can take that and adapt and edit it to meet their needs as an organization, but gives them a standard template to work with when they're onboarding new volunteers within their organization. As we all know, volunteers are the backbone to sport. And in many cases, volunteers are brought on, but the orientation process of their onboarding is not necessarily effective and it can be overwhelming for volunteers. So this is a manual that helps them with that process and gives them a guideline of basic information they should be providing to their volunteers when they come on board. Furthermore, we've engaged with an organization called Sport Law and Strategy Group, who's come out a couple of different times now in the early stages to talk about club operations, and most recently to talk about COVID-19 and business operations during COVID-19. So everything around employment, how do you use social media, engaging with people online now that you're virtual, safety in sport, how to run your AGMs, how to manage fees. So this was in the early stages that they came out and presented. We were originally supposed to run a Female Leaders in Sports Summit. That had to be canceled as a result of COVID. So we shifted and we still brought out our identified keynote speaker, Sheila Croxton, who is a 3-time Olympic coach. And she spoke to excellence and retention of women in sport. She really spoke to the critical elements of engaging females and keeping them involved. She spoke about her path as a female coach, the ups and downs, the challenges, why she was successful, and what needs to happen in order for more females to be successful in sport. Here are some of the comments that came back after Sheila's presentation. Just so I'll put those up on the screen so people can take a look at them there. So really positive feedback, and many took it away. We even, as our Sport Equity and Inclusion Committee, have incorporated some of the comments she shared through that presentation. And most recently, we hosted an Upping Your Game sponsorship workshop in partnership with See What She Can Do, where they provided tools and resources to support our local sport organizations in their efforts with sponsorship during the time of COVID-19. And we most recently have just confirmed that we'll be moving forward with social media workshop, 2-part series that will be led by the communications team here at the town of Aurora for local sport organizations. And it will provide an overview of how to effectively use each of the social media platforms, and be a working session where they can actually walk away with some social media posts that they can use for their own organization. And in regards to effective and active communication efforts, so since I've come on board, the town has played a larger role in promoting various initiatives within sport. So we've created 2 sections on the town website. One focuses on resources and tools for local sport organizations. So this is where our manuals that I've referenced are housed, upcoming workshop details, as well as information for community members. So where they can access fee subsidy support, list of local sport organizations, and links to their website. So those 2 sections are now on our website, as well as active posting on social media. So I know that question came up about during John's presentation in regards to the town posting with regards to tryouts and things like that. So we don't go to the degree of in-depth sport by sport, just in terms of capacity and the number of sports within the town of Aurora, but general information with regards to sport. So we promoted our female leaders in 2020, but we also share and promote information out, such as Sport Aurora's All Kids Can Play, information about Rowan's Law, concussion legislation, Coaches Week, Thanks Coach, encouraging people in the community to actually support and recognize their coaches. Another area of focus is responding to the changing demographics in the community, engaging culturally diverse groups. So right before the pandemic happened, we'd actually started to engage in partnerships with the Welcome Center Immigrant Services, as well as the school boards, and had done a presentation to the Alabar Muslim Association. COVID hit. Our in-person interaction, we were going and we were setting up a table. We had intended to do in-person focus groups at both the school boards and the Welcome Center Immigrant Services. That had to be put on hold. Obviously, those organizations, their priorities shifted. Schools have a major priority around safety for students right now. So eventually we'd like to move into a focus of doing some online surveys to hear a bit more from our community members about their wants and needs related to sport and physical activity. Sport tourism, it was identified as a priority in both the Aurora Sport Plan and the Economic Development Strategy. The town is at a critical point. John's just spoken to you about the field development strategy around future facility development, and there's also others that are up for consideration. I think at the last meeting, you were presented with information about the aquatics feasibility study. So we will be hosting a sport tourism workshop with council and staff, and the purpose is to identify the benefits and risks associated with engaging in sport tourism. So future decisions related to facilities, for example, will impact the capacity of this community to bring sport tourism into the community. So understanding the benefits and risks will help make those future decisions. And finally, I just want to touch on, we were supposed to launch in person again right before when COVID hit. Mayor's Roundtable of Sport was to take place sort of twice a year. It just happened, the timing, we'd scheduled our first one to be in person. We shifted quickly to virtually, and we have hosted 8 meetings. Most of them happened in a very short period of time for the first 3 to 4 months after COVID hit. where we were actually meeting every other week with the sport organizations. And it was an opportunity to come together, to communicate with one another. It's an opportunity to bring for sport groups to bring forward sort of what are their big topics of discussion in the year ahead, what challenges do they have, as well as us to share information related to the sport plan. Obviously, our first initial meetings, there was a very heavy focus on COVID. So that's where we brought Sport Law and Strategy Group out. A lot of the sport organizations benefited from communicating with one another, learning from one another, talking about what their challenges were and how they were going to move forward. Just so as an update for you in terms of future meetings, so we have just recently finalized our next meeting will take place on March 29th, where we'll focus on, again, some updates related to COVID. We should have a better sense as to what direction we'll be going, as well as some sport plan updates. So that's a quick overview of what's happened over the last little bit. Obviously, there's some more things here and there, but at a high level, some of the areas of focus that I've been working on since I stepped into this position in August of 2019. So I'd like to open the floor to any questions that may have. I'm going to stop share just so I can see everybody on the screen, but if I need to, I can go back to the presentation as well.
Sorry, Erin, I'm just going to interject because I do need someone as a mover and a seconder to put this item on the floor. So can I get a mover, Councillor Humphreys, and a seconder, Laura? Perfect. So the memorandum regarding sports status report has been received, and that the committee advisory committee comments regarding that will be received and referred to staff for consideration. Does the committee have any questions or comments?
I've got my hand up again. It's Chris. So through you, Madam Chair. So thank you, Erin. And rightly so, I kind of mixed John's presentation and some of my questions with maybe what I read through the materials for yours. And you've already commented back around the use of social media and communications. And so I don't know if you heard off the top, I'm affiliated with the Aurora.
Sorry to interrupt you, Chris. Just for procedure purposes, sorry to interject, Madam Chair, but since you have declared an interest regarding this particular topic, I think it's just as part of procedure, any member who declares an interest should not take part in the discussion or the vote of the topic. So just so you are aware of that. So I apologize for interjecting, but I should have clarified that earlier.
Okay, so I guess
so it is part of the process. My apologies for interjecting. I don't mean to interrupt.
Okay, so I guess that means that I'm out. Okay.
Councillor Humphreys.
Hi, thank you to you, Madam Chair. And yeah, Chris, I'm sorry about that. I know that that's stuff that we're used to around the council table. Sometimes they kick me out of the in council chambers, they kick me out and then tell me when to get back in. So it's a tough one when you could have that. But in terms of the presentation, thank you so much, Erin. It's exceptional. I know we've seen this at the council table. And I just wanted to thank you very much for the enormous work done and continue to focus on in all the different areas of sport-related initiatives that we really need to keep on top of and understand the changes and requirements during, especially these different times. My question is a little different. Do you think through all the initiatives that you're working on that there's opportunities for grants coming up now that there's so many different challenges for all these different municipalities that we could write some sort of grants for some of the work that you're working on? I just wondered if that was in the works at all or anything of that nature. Just thought I'd ask. To you, Madam Chair, if I could ask Erin.
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Humphreys, thank you so much for the question. So definitely always on the radar to look at some of the initiatives and where opportunities lie to apply for funding that could support moving those forward. Initially, we did apply for like the 20 female leaders in 2020 was as a result of the grant.
Great.
And in particular, the focus around our Sport Equity and Inclusion Committee and the work that we're going to be doing related to that over the next 4 months or so as we work through some of the priority gaps, we'll be looking to identify grant opportunities to further support the initiatives associated with developing women and girls in sport. And then the other area of focus in that will be around the changing demographics in the community. And obviously that one was a big halt when we were had scheduled to go in for some focus groups to really understand some things that we could do or potentially change. So I think once we're able to further move forward further with those focus groups, it will help us identify some new initiatives that we potentially could put in place where we can focus on ensuring everybody in the community. So there's no grants that are currently being written related to the sport plan initiatives, but definitely on the radar as we continue to develop plans. Another one that we were looking at is in regards to sport for persons with a physical disability. So again, some of the works we were looking to bring some try-it sessions out into the schools. Those got stopped, obviously. So a few things have, but I appreciate the question, and definitely as we move forward on I think developing and identifying new programming needs, that's where we'll place further focus on applying for grants to support those.
Great. Thank you so much. And again, thanks for all the great work.
Thank you.
Is there any further comments? Jen?
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. Erin, just in all of the great work that you've done, and especially having to do this through an unprecedented time like we're in now with COVID, is there any, as a next phase, any work being done on how we can proceed with some form of sport in 2021 in a safe manner? I'm thinking mostly for the younger generation, and how we definitely have to strike that balance of what is safe to do and what is appropriate to do. And nobody has a crystal ball, but just wondering if there's kind of any sort of safe back onto the fields type work being done.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Excellent question, Jen. And so a lot of discussions, so there's a lot of protocols and procedures in place at multiple levels of sport where return to safe sport took place. Sort of a national sport organization developed their policies and procedures that then went down to a provincial sport organization who then shared it with their local sport organizations. So there's that side of it where our local sport organizations have a set of protocols, procedures they need to implement to safely return to the field of play, whatever field that is, whether it's on the ice or whatever it may be. Simultaneously, with the town and use of facilities, we actually developed a return to play document that now each of the user groups had to, it was part of their permitting process, and certain protocols were in place. In my most recent discussions, I've been meeting with a number of the sport groups one-on-one since 2021 started. And some of the greatest challenges our sport groups are facing is making plans, in particular for the upcoming spring and summer season, where the unknown of what the gathering size is going to be is really sort of a challenge for them. So what we've been encouraging them to do through discussions is to look at each of the different color-coded reopening plans. So if we are in the red zone, this is what's permitted if you're an outdoor sport or an indoor sport. If we're in the orange zone, so that they can start to look at their planning procedures for the upcoming season to see where, how they would deliver or what the model would look like, so that they're more prepared for when they do get to that stage. So recognizing again that house league model can be really challenging in terms of traditionally they may have out on a field 25, 30 kids, and it's a house league of 30 different teams rotating all around one another, and it's a significant shift that they'll need to look at. So it's a matter of looking at the different models. So there's many sport organizations that are taking that approach where they can sort of look at each of the different zones to know, okay, if I'm going to move forward, this is how I'm going to do it. And then I would say as well on top, our Mayor's Roundtable of Sport discussions have really focused on collaboration amongst our sport groups where we can all share and learn from one another. To be able to talk about one of my focuses on the March 29th meeting will be for our winter sports who were on again, off again, on again, off again. What did they learn and what learning can they share with our spring, summer sports who may go through the same thing? We don't know if we're going to be on again, off again, shifting from 25 people to 10 people. And so what did you learn in that process? And what can our sport groups that are coming up to deliver in the spring, summer can prepare themselves more effectively for that as much as you can. So those are some of the things in play to be able to, I know from a sport group perspective, they all want to do anything possible to be able to provide the opportunities for the community, but ensuring they do it in a safe way. So again, always talking about those, bringing in experts to talk about the process. And then as well, I mean, at the town, from a community services perspective and programming, they're always looking at, if they're permitted to do so, this is the modeling, this is what it will look like, and shifting with each decision made by the province as to the opening procedures and what phase that will fall into. So hopefully that answers your question. Or
that does. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. It's through you, Madam Chair, it's certainly a time where the more we can encourage all the organizations to be as creative as possible too. Like soccer may not be able to look exactly like soccer looked in 2019, but maybe it's smaller groups of kids farther apart, no picking up the ball. I don't know, but anything to get them back out there getting exercise, right? Thank you so much.
Okay, is there any further comments for Aaron? Earl, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I was just waving my hand. Hopefully you saw it. Through you, Madam Chair, this is my first question on this committee, so I'm going to make it a doozy. Yeah, I'm just kidding. First, a comment. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was excellent. Some of the things, the gender equity, the safe sport pieces, I think the Mayor's Roundtable are excellent initiatives. So first, that comment. And I guess my question, it may even be an impossible one to answer, to be honest. But seeing some of the language around the Mayor's Roundtable, knowing what I sort of know of the way people are predicting sport is going in the next sort of 5 to 10 years. It's happening more in the US, but I think it's going to gravitate north. This kind of creation of super clubs or athletic clubs and the kind of taking collaboration to the point of kind of consolidation, right? Where you've got multiple groups. I think the question, so the situation has become really relevant today because of the fragility of some of our amateur sport, right? The volunteer driven. Has there ever been any conversations, maybe even particularly in that Mayor's Roundtable, about thinking in a new way, right? A consolidation of clubs. Instead of having 50 clubs, you have 3, and they operate multiple sports and they work through the town of Aurora. I mean, I think we're uniquely positioned in Aurora. It's a relatively compact group. The ability for us perhaps to do that in Aurora more than other places in Canada, it might be better here. Has that ever come up in any of the discussions?
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question. So in terms of consolidating clubs, no, have not been discussions on the table. In terms of in the early stages, so when we've hosted our first sort of round of 7 Mayor's Roundtable of Sport, where we spoke to sort of how we move forward and how do we really look at this as an opportunity to look back at and evaluate how we're delivering our programming and how it meets the needs of the communities. And is there an opportunity to make change, and would that align? And so we did put out there, or I did put out there, sort of encouraging our sport groups to look at opportunities. So is there an opportunity to partner with other sport clubs in the community where you deliver some multi-sport programming? So whatever sports it could be, but there's so many sports that the skills from one sport are going to contribute to the effectiveness and success in another sport. That do you look at collaborating and running camps together, and in the morning they spend at one sport in the afternoon? So there was some of those discussions. Whether it transpired into anything, I wouldn't say so. Is there always a sort of goal to encourage clubs to collaborate together and promote and encourage multi-sport participation and the avenue to do so? Yes. Your question in regards to consolidation, not something that we focused on or discussed at this point, but I appreciate the comments back, and I think the emphasis on providing as much opportunity for individuals to participate in multiple sports is really the future direction, and one that needs to be encouraged more and more, so that individuals aren't specializing too early and they're really developing as a whole athlete is an important one for sure. So a difficult question probably, because to say consolidation, I'm not sure in terms of future direction on that one.
Okay, is there any further questions for Erin at this time? Okay. Thank you, Erin, for your time. I am going to call a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Erin. And we're just going to move on to our next agenda item, our final agenda item. Hopefully, Chris, you can join us again. And this is for the memorandum from Traffic and Transportation Analysis regarding Henderson Drive and Lee Gate pedestrian crosswalk. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion, please? Laura, and a seconder. Shivani, am I saying your name right? Shivani?
It's Shivangi.
Shivangi, thank you.
No problem.
The memorandum regarding the Henderson Drive and Lee Gate pedestrian crossover be received, and that the Community Advisory Committee comments regarding the Henderson Drive pedestrian crossover at Lee Gate be received and referred for staff for consideration for their action. Would staff like to speak on this matter, please?
Hi, good evening. This is Michael Bat here. I'm the transportation analyst, and I would like to provide the committee with an overview of the recently installed pedestrian crossover located on Henderson Drive. So the level 2 type C pedestrian crossover on the west approach of Henderson Drive at the intersection of Tamarack Trail and Lee Gate was installed on October 2020. Now there are 4 types of pedestrian crossovers. The first one is level 1 type A, which consists of side-mounted pedestrian crossing sign, a pedestrian actuated double-side internally illuminated overhead crossing, and pavement marking. Level 2 type B consists of both side-mounted and overhead-mounted pedestrian crossing sign. Again, it also has the pedestrian actuated rectangular flashing beacon and pavement markings. Level 2 type C, which is the one that's being installed on Henderson Drive, has very similar features with the type B, but just without the overhead mounted pedestrian crossing sign. The last one is level 2 type D. And this one is, again, it's very similar to type C, but without the pedestrian actuated functions. The selection criteria are generally based on 3 elements. So two-way traffic flow volumes, the existing posted speed, and the number of lanes for the street. Since the sign was installed, we experienced 2 malfunction of the unit. The first incident happened on November 26, 2020, where the flashing beacon was just continuously flashing without any pedestrian activations. We contacted the contractor. They came in almost immediately, and the unit was reset and was up and running again. The second incident that was brought to attention happened on January 6, 2021, beginning of this year. And it was a very similar situation. Again, the flashing beacon was just continuously flashing without any pedestrian activations. And again, we contacted our contractor immediately, and it was resolved, I believe, within a week. They have to reset the unit. And since then, the unit's been running, to my knowledge, and no more further issues been reported to us. So if there's any questions, please let me know. I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions, comments from the committee? Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to Mr. Batt. Thank you so much, Michael, for being here this evening. And so the reason this is on the agenda is I did receive several residents during those times that Michael mentioned. The light was flashing, and what it was doing, it concerned them so much that they felt that, especially the residents that live around the area, they felt that it's sort of a false sense of security, and the cars were starting to ignore the flashing lights. And so some of the residents were wondering, was this the most appropriate, safe crossing measure? So it looks from the report that it looks like it meets all the warrants for this type of crossing. And since the last issue that you mentioned, Michael, I have not received any more concerns. And one of the things that I learned from Michael is that when these things are brand new, lots of people who are used to traveling after years and years and years of traveling, they're not used to it, and they sort of forget it's there, and they'll run it, or they won't honor the way that you need to stop, make sure there's nobody, when someone's crossing. So I think that's sort of what one of the residents in particular brought the concern to me, saying that, maybe we should take it down. Maybe we should just get rid of it because people are, thinking it's safe to cross. And she was worried because of the malfunctioning that this was going to continue. But to Michael's point, it's been over a month, maybe almost 2 now, that it's working fine. And I've been taking routes that way just to see if it was working, and it worked really well because I stopped the other day. Oh, there was a pedestrian cross, and it's interesting. It's quite a busy crossing right there. So I can't imagine probably the crossing that was sort of being done before this happened. So I guess to your point, it certainly warrants the crossing there, right?
Absolutely. It warrant the warrant is based on 2 criteria. It's the number of pedestrian crossing and the number of vehicle volumes on the street. So it met both criteria, and based on the selection matrix that I just described earlier, the level 2 type C is the most appropriate type of pedestrian crossover for this location.
Right, perfect. And the other one thing I did discover, just for the whole committee, is through Madam Chair, we have an obligation as a town to address intersections or areas like that, because God forbid somebody gets hurt. The town would be like, did you not pay attention to what was going on here? You should have been putting some measures to make it safer. So that's an obligation we need to do. Now, since then, I haven't heard. I mean, initially I did check with the resident, and I haven't heard back. I'll go back again to say, how do you think things are feeling? But just one last comment or question to you, through you, Madam Chair, to Michael. Do you feel that this is like the best type of, safety measure to put in, or are there other suggestions that you would prefer? I just thought I'd ask you.
It's very difficult to assess what is the best type of measure for any certain locations. I think it's similar to what you just mentioned earlier. Any new infrastructure that we install, there's got to be a transition period. It could be an always stop that we install. It could be a pedestrian crossover, new traffic signal, and I think it's important that that we monitor during the initial phase to make sure that everything works appropriately, and we take appropriate measure to address those issues. So after the 2 incidents, I did contact York Regional Police I reached out to them to hopefully requesting for enforcement, especially for people that doesn't stop.
Yeah.
I haven't heard back yet, but I will continue to submit our request to hope that some type of enforcement will be in place, and hopefully through education, through enforcement, that that will create a safer crossing for pedestrian crossing Henderson Drive.
That's great. Great, thank you very much. Through Madam Chair, I'll keep an eye and listen for residents, but I appreciate tonight's report, how we came up with this solution, and that we're keeping an eye on things to make sure it's still the right solution, and asking YRP to keep a close eye in the area is a good idea as well. So thank you so much. That's all, Madam Chair.
Is there any other comments or questions?
Hi, Madam Chair. I do have a question, Madam Chair, for you. It's not actually so much of a question, but more for a common suggestion, especially when new signs and new measures are put in place for people that drive down that path. And like you were saying earlier, Councillor, they're not accustomed to they're so habitual in the way that they drive or pass those intersections that sometimes they don't recognize if there has been a new measure that's been put in place. And I'll confess that I actually did not notice that sign as I was driving by until it started flashing. I just had to abruptly stop. So just a suggestion, perhaps some sort of signage or something that should go up to actually spot a new introduction on any intersection or any lights or what have you would be helpful for the residents, especially people that are local to the area.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we can consider. We will look into putting up those new signs through the cooperation with the operations department, and to notify local resident or just people going around the area that this is a new infrastructure that was in place. Thank you for the comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any further comments from Michael? Michael, I just want to say thank you for mentioning that you're going to follow up with the police, because I think that might be an important step to take to kind of see how many cars have been ticketed or what they've seen on their end, to kind of get a sense of if it is working or not. That's my only comment. I want to just check in one last time if there's any other further comments. Okay, so thank you, Michael. I'm going to ask for a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, Michael, for joining us. I'm going to move on to our last couple of agenda items and close off the night. We have an informational items. We have no informational items this evening, but I do want to just say welcome to Siobhan G, and I'm pretty sure I butchered your name again. I'm sorry. Earl and Councillor Humphreys for joining the committee. We're happy to have you part of the team. And finally, I would like to adjourn. May I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Earl, seconded by Laura. All in favor? All right, great, guys. Have a
Thank you.
Dennis, are you opposing this?
He wants to stay.
I was late.